to Minneapolis, where the White House seems to be changing course over its immigration crackdown in Minnesota. A federal judge in the state has ordered the acting director of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE, Todd Lyons, to appear personally in court on Friday to answer accusations the Trump administration has failed to comply with court orders. Two further key developments following outrage over the killing of two US citizens by federal agents in the city this month. Border Czar Tom Homan is to take over leading immigration enforcement operations in the city, and the Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bovino is expected to leave along with 3,000 of his agents. So let's head to my colleague Carl Masman, who's still there in Minneapolis for us. Carl, let's take this in stages. That line I read out that's emerged in the last hour or so, the acting head of ICE called to federal court on Friday. Tell me more about that, because that sounds significant.
Matthew, we have seen some clashes in the courts in Minneapolis, and we've seen, of course, the demonstrations in the streets, but really a legal battle has been playing out here over the past few weeks over this immigration crackdown. This is the latest saga here. Todd Lyons, the acting director of ICE, now being called to appear before a judge, or at least submit testimony on Friday about the administration's actions and really lack of follow through when it comes to court orders. So one big example here that the judge is citing is the failure to hold a bond hearing for a detainee who was being held by ICE essentially here in the city within 7 days. They said, hey, look, you need to hold this bond hearing. This person has the right to appear in court and to say whether or not they should be released. Are they dangerous? Should they be held here, or can this person be released while they await some sort of a court hearing after that? So these are serious allegations on the part of this Minnesota judge here. And of course, this is all with the backdrop of some other legal hearings that we were following yesterday. There's a case in court right now brought by the state and local officials asking for all 3,000 of these immigration agents to leave the city. They call this entire operation unconstitutional. That's something we'll be waiting for. We haven't had a ruling there yet. And of course, you mentioned Greg Bovino. He is expected to be leaving the state soon. He's the head of the Border Patrol Force. And Tom Homan, the border czar who does report directly to the president, he is expected to arrive at some point today. We haven't heard whether or not he has actually set foot here, but certainly at least a shift in strategy and definitely some leadership changes at the top of this operation here in Minnesota.
Yes.
This just in. A federal judge has dropped a legal bombshell that could shatter the very foundation of how our government operates. We're talking about a direct confrontation between the judiciary and the executive branch, a clash so monumental it threatens to redefine presidential power as we know it. This isn't just another legal squabble. This is a constitutional earthquake, and the aftershocks will be felt across every corner of America. If you care about your rights, about the rule of law, and about the limits of government power, then you need to hear this. We are witnessing a moment that could be taught in history books for generations to come, a moment where a judge stood up and said, enough is enough. And folks, when a federal judge speaks with this kind of authority, demanding answers from the very top, it's time to pay attention. This isn't just breaking news. This is a potential turning point for our democracy. What's happening in Minnesota right now isn't some quiet legal proceeding. It's a battle for the soul of our constitutional system. And trust me, you won't believe who's being dragged into court and why. The implications are staggering, and the stakes couldn't be higher. This is the kind of story that rips through the headlines and forces everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about power, justice, and accountability. And believe me, the people involved at the highest levels of government are feeling the heat right now. This is a story of unprecedented judicial action against the very highest echelons of the executive branch. This is about a judge drawing a line in the sand and daring the administration to cross it. The tension is palpable, and the outcome is anyone's guess. But one thing is certain, America will never be the same after this. Before we dive deeper into this explosive situation, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss a single update on this developing story, because what happens next will impact every single one of U.S. Here's what just happened and why it's shaking the entire political establishment to its core. A federal judge, a chief judge no less, in Minnesota has issued an absolutely stunning order. We're talking about a direct summons, a demand for the head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the director of ICE, to personally appear in court. Not a lawyer, not a spokesperson, but the actual chief of ICE required to show up in person. And why? To explain why people detained by ICE are allegedly being denied basic legal hearings. Folks, this isn't just about immigration policy. It's about fundamental due process, about the basic constitutional right to be heard in court. The judge isn't just making a suggestion. The court is openly threatening a contempt ruling against the administration. Contempt of court is a serious charge, a legal hammer that can be used when someone defies a judge's orders. This judge is alleging nothing less than a systemic breakdown of constitutional rights, a failure of due process on a massive scale, right in the middle of the current immigration crackdown. This isn't some minor procedural hiccup. This is a direct accusation that the government is failing to uphold the very bedrock principles of American justice. This legal showdown is a critical test, a true moment of truth for the unitary executive theory. That's the idea pushed by some in the White House, that the president has almost unchecked power within the executive branch. But this judge is saying, not so fast. They see this as a critical check on what they perceive as an overreach of executive power, a much-needed pushback against policies they believe are eroding democratic norms. One prominent civil rights lawyer even stated, "This is what happens when due process is ignored. The courts are forced to step in, and thank goodness they did." Their message is clear. The judiciary is the last line of defense for individuals' liberties, and this judge has bravely stepped up to that sacred duty. But on the other side, administration, loyalists, and conservative commentators are absolutely furious. They are slamming the judge, accusing the judiciary of handcuffing law enforcement during what they insist is a critical national security crisis. They argue that judges are overstepping their bounds, interfering with the executive's ability to secure the border and enforce immigration laws. For them, this is judicial activism at its worst, a clear example of unelected judges undermining the will of the people and endangering public safety. They claim that the judge is ignoring the real-world complexities of managing a border crisis and that these legal challenges only make the job of protecting the nation harder. Sources close to the administration are reportedly seething, viewing this as a direct attack on the president's authority and a dangerous precedent that could paralyze future efforts to enforce federal law. The tension is palpable, a clear indicator that this isn't just a legal disagreement, but a profound ideological battle over the role of government and the balance of power, and the very interpretation of our Constitution. This escalating rhetoric shows just how high the stakes are and how deeply entrenched both sides are in their positions. It's a true showdown, and the whole country is watching. If the executive branch is perceived to be ignoring the judiciary, or if the judiciary feels it must take such extreme measures to enforce its orders, then the delicate balance our founders established is under severe strain. Americans deserve better than a system where due process is treated as an optional extra. They deserve a government that respects the rights of all individuals, even those facing difficult legal situations. This isn't about being tough on crime or tough on immigration. It's about being true to the values enshrined in our founding documents. When a judge has to drag the head of a federal agency into court, it signals a deep crisis of trust and a profound concern about the abuse of power. This is about ensuring that no branch of government, no official, no matter how high up, can simply ignore the Constitution. It's about protecting the very foundation of our liberties. And that's why this is so much more than just a legal story. It's a story about what kind of country we want to be. It's about whether our government truly serves the people under the law, or if it believes it can operate above it. The reactions to this judicial earthquake have been immediate and absolutely furious, reflecting the deep divisions tearing at our nation right now. On one side, civil rights attorneys are absolutely hailing the judge's boldness. They're calling this a courageous stand, a necessary intervention to protect fundamental human rights. For them, this judge is a hero, someone finally willing to hold the powerful accountable and ensure that justice isn't just an abstract concept, but a lived reality for everyone. They argue that this isn't just about immigration. It's about reminding the executive branch that it is not above the law and that constitutional protections apply to all, regardless of their background or legal status. The judiciary, an independent branch of government, is stepping in and saying that even the executive branch, even during what it calls a national security crisis, must operate within the bounds of the Constitution. This is a clash of titans, a direct challenge to executive authority, and it's happening right now with incredible implications for everyone. It's about whether anyone, even the most powerful people in government, is truly above the law. Now, why is this so incredibly serious? Why should every American be paying attention to a judge's order in Minnesota? Because this isn't just about immigration detainees. It's about the very core principles that define us as a nation. When a federal court, especially a chief judge, threatens to hold a high-ranking government official in contempt, it means they believe something fundamentally wrong is happening, something that strikes at the heart of our legal system. We're talking about the constitutional right to due process. The idea that every person, regardless of their status, deserves a fair hearing before the law. This isn't a suggestion. It's a non-negotiable demand embedded in our Constitution. The judge isn't just saying that mistakes were made. They are alleging a systemic failure, a widespread denial of basic rights. This suggests that the problem isn't isolated, but deeply ingrained in the way ICE is operating right now. And that, my friends, should send shivers down the spine of every American who believes in justice. This situation is being described by legal experts as a constitutional tipping point. Think about that phrase, tipping point. It means we're at a moment where things could go one way or another, a moment where the balance of power could shift dramatically. So what happens next? The eyes of the entire legal world are now fixed on Friday, when the acting head of ICE, Todd Lyons, is scheduled to walk into that Minneapolis courtroom. This is a high-stakes game of chicken with the highest possible consequences. If Lyons shows up and the judge isn't satisfied with his explanations, we could see a sitting federal agency head held in contempt of court. Can you imagine the chaos that would cause? It would be a direct strike against the administration's authority and a signal to every other agency that the courts are still the bosses when it comes to the law. On the flip side, the administration might try to find a way out, perhaps by releasing specific detainees or rushing through hearings at the last minute to appease the judge. We've already seen some signs of a shift, with the president putting border czar Tom Homan in charge of the Minnesota operation and even talking about some agents leaving the city. But the core issue, whether the government can just ignore court orders during a crackdown, isn't going away. This could head all the way to the Supreme Court. The stakes are nothing less than the future of the Unitary Executive theory. If the courts back down, the presidency gains massive new powers. If the judge holds his ground, it's a win for the system of checks and balances that has kept this country running for over 200 years. The uncertainty is thick enough to cut with a knife, and the next few days will determine if we are still a nation governed by laws or a nation governed by the will of whoever is in charge. This situation is a wake-up call for all of us because it proves that the system only works if people are willing to stand up and defend it. Chief Judge Patrick Schiltz has drawn his line in the sand, and now the ball is in the administration's court. We are at a point where the simple act of a judge demanding a hearing is being treated like a revolutionary act. That tells you everything you need to know about the tension in our country right now. Whether you support the current immigration policies or you're horrified by them, the breakdown of the legal process should worry you. Because if the government can ignore the rules for one group of people today, what's to stop them from ignoring the rules for you tomorrow? This is about the due process that we all rely on to keep us safe from the whims of powerful officials. We're watching a live action test of our democracy, and the results are going to affect our lives for a long time. It's a moment of truth for the Department of Justice, for ICE, and for the very idea of judicial independence. As we wait for Friday, the question hangs over everything. Will the government respect the court, or will they continue to push the limits until something finally breaks? The answer to that question will define the next chapter of American history. We are witnessing the gears of our republic grinding against each other, and the friction is creating sparks that could start a fire. This is the definition of a constitutional crisis, and it's happening in real time. What do you think about this? Is the judge right to demand the ICE chief show up in person, or is the court overstepping its bounds during a national security crisis? I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think the administration will back down, or are we headed for a total legal collapse? Make sure to like this video if you found this update helpful. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our coverage of the fallout this Friday. This story is moving fast, and you need to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.